Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Devastator and looked out at the stars. The massive human warship had just come out of hyperspace above a blue-green planet. This world was called Kepler 442b, and it was home to the aliens who had declared war on humanity 6 months ago. The planet looked peaceful from space. Its surface was covered with oceans and green lands. Cities dotted the continents, glowing with alien technology. But Jake knew that looks could be deceiving. These aliens had killed 40,000 innocent humans on New Haven Colony. Men, women, and children had died because these creatures thought humans were weak. "Commander Morrison, sir," said Katie Sullivan from our station. She was the ship's tactical officer, and her voice was steady despite what they were about to do. "The alien defense grid is powering up. I'm reading massive energy spikes across the planet." Jake nodded. He had expected this. The aliens called themselves the Kepler Union, and they had been very confident when they sent their ultimatum to Earth. They had demanded that humanity give up all their outer colonies and retreat to their home system. They had called humans weak primates who had no right to explore the galaxy. Earth's leaders had given them a different answer. Admiral Peter Collins had created Operation Cleansing Fire after the attack on New Haven. The human response would be swift and complete. No mercy would be shown to those who killed innocent people. "Weapons systems online," Jake ordered. His voice carried across the bridge, and every officer knew what it meant. The Devastator's main weapon was something the aliens had never seen before. The quantum devastation cannon could break down matter at the atomic level. It didn't just destroy things, it made them stop existing. The weapon began its charging sequence. Deep in the ship's core, massive generators fed power into the cannon. The energy readings climbed higher and higher. Jake watched the numbers on his screen and felt no emotion. This was justice for New Haven. "Sir, alien fleet approaching," reported Lieutenant Dan Parker from the sensor station. "I count over 300 ships of various sizes. They're moving to intercept us." Jake looked at the tactical display. The alien ships were spread out in a defensive formation around their planet. They had sleek designs with curved hulls that gleamed in the starlight. Their weapons were already charging, preparing to fire on the lone human ship. "Let them come," Jake said calmly. "They started this war. We're going to finish it." The alien fleet opened fire first. Hundreds of plasma weapons lit up the darkness of space. The energy beams struck the Devastator's shields and created brilliant explosions of light. The ship shook slightly from the impacts, but the defensive barriers held strong. Jake allowed himself a small smile. The aliens had no idea what they were facing. Human technology had advanced far beyond anything the galaxy had seen. The Devastator's adaptive shielding could absorb energy attacks and grow stronger from them. The alien weapons were actually making the human ship's defenses more powerful. "Quantum devastation cannon at 50% charge," reported Katie. Her fingers danced over her controls as she prepared the weapon systems. "Secondary weapons are ready to fire on your command." The alien fleet grew bolder when they saw their attacks weren't destroying the human ship. More ships joined the battle, firing everything they had at the Devastator. The space around the human warship turned into a light show of explosions and energy beams. 75% charge, Katie announced. "The aliens are concentrating their fire on our forward shields." Jake watched the tactical display as alien ships moved closer. They were trying to overwhelm the human defenses with raw firepower. It was a good strategy against most enemies, but it wouldn't work against humanity's most advanced warship. 100% charge achieved, Katie reported. "Quantum devastation cannon ready to fire." Jake looked at the planet below. Billions of aliens lived on that world. They had families, dreams, and hopes for the future. But they had chosen war with humanity. They had chosen to kill innocent people. Now they would pay the price for that choice. "Fire," Jake ordered. The quantum devastation cannon released its energy in a focused beam of pure destruction. The beam struck the planet's surface and immediately began its work. Where it hit, the ground simply stopped existing. Mountains, forests, and cities vanished as if they had never been there. The destruction spread outward in a perfect sphere. The weapon didn't just destroy matter. It broke the bonds that held atoms together. Everything the expanding field touched was reduced to nothing. The aliens on the surface had no time to scream or run. They simply ceased to exist. "Direct hit on the primary target," Katie reported. "The devastation field is expanding as programmed." The alien fleet went into panic mode. Their ships broke formation and tried to retreat from the human warship. But Jake wasn't done with them yet. These aliens had started the war by attacking a peaceful colony. Now they would learn why that had been a mistake. "Activate secondary weapons," Jake commanded. "Fire at will." The Devastator's railguns came online. These weapons fired metal projectiles at speeds close to the speed of light. When they hit an alien ship, the results were devastating. The first target, a large cruiser, was torn in half by a single shot. The second ship simply exploded when 3 projectiles hit it at once. Lieutenant Parker called out targets from his sensor station. Alien command ship at bearing 270. Heavy cruiser attempting to flee at bearing 115. Katie's weapons found their marks every time. The alien ships had no defense against the human rail guns. Their shields were designed to stop energy weapons, not solid projectiles moving at impossible speeds. One by one, the alien vessels were destroyed. "Alien survivors are sending surrender signals," reported Communications Officer Linda Hayes. "They're begging us to stop the attack." Jake looked at the planet below. The devastation field had consumed almost half of the world's surface. The beautiful blue-green planet was turning into a dead rock. The aliens who had been so proud and confident 6 months ago were now pleading for mercy. "No mercy," Jake said. Quietly, "They showed none to our people on New Haven." The last alien ship tried to ram the Devastator in a desperate suicide attack. The ship's point defense systems cut it apart before it could get close. Thousands of small laser cannons tracked the incoming vessel and reduced it to scrap metal in seconds. Below, the devastation field continued its work. The planet's atmosphere was being stripped away as the weapon consumed everything in its path. Soon, there would be nothing left but a barren rock floating in space. "Mission accomplished," Katie reported. "No alien survivors detected on the planet's surface." Jake nodded and turned away from the tactical display. The first world had fallen to humanity's wrath. But this was just the beginning. Operation Cleansing Fire had many more targets, and each one would receive the same treatment. The aliens had wanted war with humanity. Now they would learn what human war truly meant. Planet by planet, world by world, humanity would show the galaxy the price of opposing Earth's children. The Devastator turned away from the dead world and began plotting its course to the next target. The war had begun, and it would not end until every enemy of humanity was extinct. Lisa Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the UE's Retribution and watched the news reports from across the galaxy. Word of Kepler 442b's destruction had spread faster than anyone expected. Every alien species in known space was talking about what the humans had done. The planet that had once been home to billions of aliens was now just a dead rock. The quantum devastation cannon had done its work perfectly. There were no survivors, no ruins, no trace that life had ever existed there. The message was clear to every species in the galaxy. This is what happens when you fight humanity. "Captain Rodriguez," said her communications officer, Nancy Davis, "we're receiving broadcasts from the Galactic Council. They're calling for emergency peace talks. Lisa nodded, but didn't change her expression. The Galactic Council represented 47 different alien species. They had stayed neutral when the Kepler Union declared war on humanity. Now they were scared and wanted to make peace before the human warships came for them too. Any response? From Earth Command? Lisa asked. Admiral Collins sent a message an hour ago, Nancy replied. Our orders remain the same. Operation Cleansing Fire continues as planned. Lisa looked at the star charts on her main screen. The second target was already marked, Proxima Centauri c. This world was home to the Zephyrians, a species known for their beautiful biotechnology and peaceful nature. But they had made a fatal mistake. They had provided medical aid to the Kepler Union after the attack on New Haven Colony. Set course for Proxima Centauri c, Lisa ordered. Maximum speed. The Retribution was different from the Devastator. While Jake Morrison's ship carried the quantum devastation cannon, Lisa's vessel was equipped with the molecular disruption array. This weapon didn't make things stop existing. It turned solid matter into superheated plasma that burned through everything it touched. As the ship jumped to hyperspace, Lisa reviewed the intelligence reports about their target. The Zephyrians had built their civilization in harmony with nature. Their cities were living organisms that grew from the planet's surface. They had no military to speak of, believing that their peaceful nature would protect them from harm. They were wrong. The Retribution dropped out of hyperspace. Above Proxima Centauri c, the planet was even more beautiful than the reports had described. The surface was covered with bioorganic structures that pulsed with soft light. The cities looked like flowers blooming across the continents, connected by streams of living tissue that carried nutrients and information. Captain, called out Tactical Officer Ben Harper from his station, I'm detecting massive movement on the planet's surface. It looks like they're trying to evacuate their population. Lisa watched the sensor readings as millions of Zephyrians fled their cities. They were loading onto bioships, living creatures bred specifically for space travel. The vessels looked like giant jellyfish with translucent bodies and flowing tentacles. How many ships are they launching? Lisa asked. Current count is over 2,000, Ben reported. But they're not armed for combat. These are civilian evacuation vessels. Lisa felt nothing as she watched the alien ships rise from the planet's surface. The Zephyrians had chosen their side when they helped the Kepler Union. They had extended the war by keeping their enemies alive. Now they would pay the same price. Incoming transmission from the planet, Nancy announced. They're requesting permission to speak. Put it through, Lisa ordered. The main screen filled with the image of a Zephyrian leader. The alien looked like a cross between a plant and an animal, with green skin that seemed to photosynthesize light. Its voice was musical and pleasing to hear. Human captain, the alien said, we know why you have come. We begged for your mercy. We only provided medical aid to the wounded. We never took part in any attack against your people. Lisa studied this alien's face. She could see genuine fear in its large, dark eyes. The Zephyrians had probably never experienced war before. They lived in a peaceful society where violence was unknown. You extended the war, Lisa replied calmly. You helped our enemies recover from our attacks. That makes you our enemy too. Please, the alien begged. We can make amends. We can provide. You with our biotechnology. We can help heal your wounded. We can do anything you ask. Lisa cut the transmission without another word. She had heard enough. The time for talking was over. Molecular disruption array charging, Ben recorded. Weapon systems online. The Zephyrian bioships had formed a defensive line between the human warship and their planet. The living vessels began to glow with bioluminescent patterns, communicating with each other through light signals. They were preparing to fight despite having no real weapons. They're trying to protect their world, observed Lieutenant Commander Amy Foster from the sensor station. "The bioships are positioning themselves to absorb our weapons' fire." Lisa watched the alien ships with professional interest. The Zephyrians were willing to sacrifice themselves to save their planet. It was admirable in a way, but it wouldn't change the outcome. "Fire," Lisa ordered. The molecular disruption array released its energy in a wide beam that swept across the Zephyrian fleet. The bioships didn't explode like metal vessels would. Instead, they simply dissolved into clouds of superheated plasma. The living creatures that had served as spacecraft died instantly, their organic components unable to withstand the incredible heat. Within minutes, the entire Zephyrian fleet was gone. The space around the planet was filled with glowing gases where the bioships had been. The aliens who had tried to evacuate their families were now nothing but expanding clouds of plasma. "All hostile vessels destroyed," Ben reported. "No survivors." Detected, Lisa turned her attention to the planet below. The biocities were still pulsing with their soft light, unaware that their defenders had been eliminated. Soon they would share the same fate. "Begin planetary bombardment," Lisa commanded. "Target the major population centers first." The molecular disruption array turned its attention to the planet's surface. The weapon fired in a sweeping pattern, painting lines of destruction across the continents. Where the energy beam touched, the biocities burst into flames and dissolved into plasma that the Zephyrians had no planetary defenses. Their peaceful nature had made them vulnerable to attack. They had never needed weapons because they had never made enemies. Now their greatest weakness was destroying them. "Direct hit on the primary biocenter," Amy reported. "The entire northern continent is burning." Lisa watched the planet's surface turn from green to orange as the biocities burned. The fires spread quickly through the organic structures, consuming everything in their path. The Zephyrians had built their civilization from living tissue, and now the tissue was dying. "Detecting massive casualties," Ben announced. "The biocities are interconnected. When one dies, it affects all the others." The bombardment continued. For 2 hours, the molecular disruption array swept back and forth across the planet's surface, ensuring that no biocity survived. The Zephyrians had numbered in the billions, but their interconnected civilization made them vulnerable to total destruction. "Planetary bombardment complete," Amy reported. "No life signs detected on the surface." Lisa looked at the dead world below. The once beautiful planet was now a burning wasteland. The biocities that had grown for thousands of years were nothing but ash and plasma. The Zephyrians, who had lived in harmony with nature, were extinct. "Mission accomplished," Lisa said quietly. "Set course for the next target." As the Retribution prepared to jump to hyperspace, emergency broadcasts filled the communication channels. Every alien species in the galaxy was now aware that humanity would not tolerate any support for their enemies. The Zephyrians had learned this lesson too late. The war was spreading beyond its original boundaries. Species that had never fired a shot at humanity were now targets because they had provided aid to those who had. The galaxy was learning that there was no neutral ground in humanity's war. Lisa reviewed the next target in their mission profile. The third world would fall within the week, and the fourth, and the fifth. One by one, humanity's enemies would be eliminated until only dead worlds remained as monuments to the price of opposing Earth's children. The Retribution jumped to hyperspace, carrying death to another world. Behind them, Proxima Centauri C continued to burn. The second planet had fallen to humanity's wrath, and many more would follow Dot in the depths of space. The few surviving Zephyrian bioships that had escaped the initial attack sent desperate messages to anyone who would listen. They warned of humanity's terrible weapons and begged for sanctuary. But no species was willing to risk becoming the next target. The ripple effect of humanity's war was spreading across the galaxy. Fear was replacing defiance His species realized that the humans would not stop until every enemy was dead. The age of human dominance was beginning, and it would be written in the ashes of dead worlds. Admiral Peter Collins stood in the command center of the U.E.S. Minion, humanity's largest warship. 3 worlds had already fallen to Operation Cleansing Fire, and the galaxy was in complete panic. His desk was covered with reports from intelligence. Officers across known space, 17 different alien species had contacted Earth in the past week. They all sent the same message. They surrendered completely and begged for mercy. They offered tribute, technology, and total submission to humanity. They promised to serve Earth in any way required. Peter read through the messages with cold satisfaction. The galaxy was finally understanding humanity's true power. But surrendering now would not save these species. They had stood by and watched as humanity's enemies declared war. Their neutrality had been a choice, and now they would pay for that choice. "Admiral," said his aide, Captain Doug Miller, "the 4th target has been confirmed. The Quartz Collective on Kepler 186f has gone completely dark. They've shut down all energy emissions and are trying to hide." Peter smiled grimly. The Quartz Collective was a species of crystalline beings who lived inside massive crystal formations. They had advanced technology and had always considered themselves superior to organic life forms. Now they were hiding like frightened children. "Assign the Annihilator to that system," Peter ordered. "Captain Miller, you'll take command of the tomb. Mission personally. I want that world reduced to dust." Doug nodded and left to prepare his ship. The U.E.S. Annihilator was equipped with the plasma storm generator, a weapon that could turn an entire planet's surface into molten glass. It was the perfect weapon for dealing with a crystalline species. Meanwhile, reports continued to flow in from across the galaxy. The 5th target, a world controlled by something called the hive mind, was offering to merge with humanity. They claimed they could enhance human capabilities and create a new hybrid species. General Rick Turner, who commanded the Ground Assault Division, found the idea disgusting. "Admiral, these creatures want to contaminate our species. They think they can make us into something like them." Peter agreed completely. Humanity didn't need enhancement from aliens. They were already perfect as they were. The hive mind's offer was an insult that would be answered with total destruction. "Prepare the obliterator," Peter ordered. "Equip it with the neutron cascade weapon. I want those creatures to suffer before they die." The neutron cascade weapon was one of humanity's most horrible creations. It didn't just destroy matter, it corrupted it at the subatomic level. Everything it touched became unstable and continued to decay, spreading the corruption to everything around it. 3 days later, Doug Miller stood on the bridge of the Annihilator as it emerged from hyperspace above the Quartz Collective's homeworld. A planet looked like a giant jewel floating in space. Its surface was covered with massive crystal formations that sparkled with internal light. "No energy emissions detected," reported Lieutenant Commander Amy Foster from the sensor station. "The entire planet appears to be dormant." Doug studied the tactical display. The Quartz Collective had built their civilization inside the crystal formations. They thought that by shutting down all power, they could hide from human sensors. They were wrong. "Activate deep space sensors," Doug ordered. "Scan for gravitational anomalies." The sensors penetrated deep into the planet's crust. The crystal formations were hollow, containing vast cities where billions of crystalline beings lived. They were all there, huddled together in the darkness, hoping that humanity would pass them by. "Target acquired," Amy reported. "I'm detecting massive population centers throughout the crystal network." Doug looked at the beautiful planet below. The crystal formations were works of art that had taken millions of years to grow. They were unique in the galaxy, impossible to replace once destroyed. In a few minutes, They would be nothing but debris. "Plasma storm generator online," announced Weapons Officer Tony Martinez. "All systems green and ready to fire." The weapon charged slowly, building up the massive energy required to create a plasma storm. The Quartz Collective had chosen their hiding place well. The crystal formations could withstand most conventional weapons. But the plasma storm generator was far from conventional. "Fire," Doug ordered. The weapon released its energy in a continuous stream that struck the planet's surface. Where the plasma touched the crystals, they didn't just melt. They exploded in chain reactions that spread across the continents. Each crystal formation was connected to others through underground networks, and the destruction spread like wildfire. Crystalline beings' death screams were audible across multiple electromagnetic frequencies. Their unique biology meant they experienced pain differently than organic creatures. As their crystal bodies shattered, they felt every fracture as agony that lasted for long minutes. "The chain reaction is spreading faster than projected," Amy reported. "The entire northern hemisphere is collapsing." Doug watched the planet's surface light up like a star as the crystal formations exploded. The beings who had thought themselves superior to organic life were dying in ways that organic creatures couldn't even imagine. Their crystalline bodies were breaking apart at the molecular level. "Detecting massive seismic activity," Tony announced. "The planet's crust is destabilizing." The destruction continued for hours. The plasma storm generator had triggered a cascade failure that spread through the entire crystal network. The Quartz Collective's interconnected civilization became their weakness as the destruction spread from one formation to another. When it was over, the planet was a dead rock covered with glass and crystal dust. The formations that had taken millions of years to grow were gone forever. The Quartz Collective, who had ruled their world for countless generations, were extinct. Meanwhile, Captain Helen Brooks approached the fifth target aboard the UES Obliterator. The hive mind's world looked normal from space: green continents and blue oceans under white clouds. But Helen knew that billions of interconnected minds lived on that surface, all sharing a single consciousness. "Captain," reported Intelligence Officer Sandra Williams, "the hive mind is still broadcasting merger proposals. They're offering to share their collective consciousness with humanity." Helen felt sick at the thought. The hive mind creatures looked like humans, but were fundamentally different. They had no individual thoughts or desires. Everything they did was decided by their collective consciousness. They wanted to turn humanity into something like themselves. "Neutron cascade weapon ready," announced Weapons Officer Dan Parker. "Target locked on the primary population center." Helen looked at the planet below. The hive mind creatures lived in perfect harmony, sharing every thought and emotion. They had no wars, no conflicts, no individual suffering. But they also had number freedom, no creativity, no individual dreams. "Fire," Helen ordered. The neutron cascade weapon struck the planet's surface and began its terrible work. The weapon corrupted matter at the subatomic level, turning stable atoms into unstable ones that continued to decay. The corruption spread outward from the impact point, consuming everything in its path. The hive mind's collective consciousness began to fragment as the corruption spread. For the first time in their species' history, individual minds were separated from the collective. Billions of creatures who had never experienced individual thought were suddenly alone in their own minds. The terror was beyond description. Creatures who had lived their entire lives as part of a collective consciousness were suddenly isolated and afraid. They didn't know how to think as individuals, how to make decisions on their own, how to cope with being alone. "The corruption is spreading faster than expected," Dan reported. "The hive mind's biology is particularly vulnerable to the cascade effect." Helen watched the planet's surface turn dark as the corruption spread. The hive mind creatures were dying. In madness and terror, their collective consciousness shattered into billions of individual fragments. Their interconnected biology made them perfect victims for the neutron cascade weapon. Planetary sterilization complete, Sandra announced. No life signs detected on the surface. Helen looked at the dead world below. The planet would remain poisoned for thousands of years, unable to support any form of life. The hive mind, who had offered to enhance humanity, were extinct. Across the galaxy, the surviving alien species watched in horror as humanity's warships continued their methodical destruction. Some species began evacuating their homeworlds, scattering to the far reaches of space. Others formed desperate alliances, hoping their combined fleets might stop the human advance. None of it mattered. Humanity had shown the galaxy that resistance was futile. The species that had dared to oppose Earth's expansion were being eliminated one by one. The terror campaign was working perfectly. Admiral Collins reviewed the mission reports with satisfaction. 5 worlds had fallen to humanity's weapons, and the galaxy was beginning to understand the new reality. Humanity was the dominant species now, and anyone who opposed them would be destroyed. Prepare the next phase, Peter ordered. Target the worlds that are forming alliances against us. Show them that cooperation will not save them. The war was entering a new phase. The galaxy's remaining species were learning that there was no defense against humanity's weapons, no alliance strong enough to resist Earth's warships. The terror campaign had BR. The galaxy's remaining species had reached their breaking point. 12 worlds had fallen to humanity's weapons, and billions of aliens were dead. The survivors knew they had only one choice left: unite or die. The Galactic Defense Coalition formed in the shadow of humanity's advancing fleet. 32 different species contributed ships and weapons to create the largest military force in galactic history. They chose Kepler 452b as their final battleground, a heavily fortified world with massive space stations and planetary shields. Admiral Peter Collins received the intelligence reports with interest. The Coalition fleet numbered almost 5,000. Ships of various designs. They had energy weapons, kinetic cannons, and defensive systems that could stop most known attacks. On paper, they looked impressive. It won't be enough, Collins told his staff officers. They're still thinking like individual species. They don't understand what they're really fighting. The human fleet that approached Kepler 452b was smaller, but infinitely more dangerous. 7 Dreadnought-class vessels led the formation, each one carrying weapons that could destroy planets. Behind them came 200 support ships, armed, with humanity's most advanced technology. Commander Tony Martinez, who led the Tactical Analysis Division, briefed the human commanders about enemy capabilities. The Coalition had assembled weapons from across the galaxy. Some fired beams of pure energy. Others launched projectiles at near-light speed. Their shields could deflect nuclear weapons and absorb massive amounts of energy. They've learned from our previous battles, Tony explained. They're using rotating shield frequencies and overlapping defensive fields. They think this will stop our weapons. Jake Morrison, still commanding the Devastator, smiled at the report. The aliens were trying to use technology to solve a problem that couldn't be solved with technology. They didn't understand that humanity's weapons operated on principles that made their defenses useless. How long until we reach the system? Jake asked. 6 hours, replied his navigation officer. The Coalition fleet is already in position around the planet. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler 452b system. The Coalition fleet was waiting for them, spread out in a defensive formation that covered millions of kilometers. Every ship had its weapons charged and ready. Captain Sandra Williams, commanding the UES Terminator, studied the enemy formation through her tactical display. The Coalition ships were beautiful in their diversity. Sleek vessels from the Andorian Republic flew alongside the organic ships of the Zephyrian survivors. Crystal craft from the outer rim worked with metal warships from the core worlds. "They're brave," Sandra admitted to her weapons officer. "They know they're going to die, but they're still here." The Coalition fleet opened fire first. 5,000 ships released their weapons simultaneously, creating a wall of energy that lit up the darkness of space. Plasma beams, particle cannons, and kinetic projectiles filled the void between the two fleets. The human ships didn't even slow down. Their adaptive shields absorbed the incoming fire without strain. The energy weapons that struck the barriers were converted into power for the human systems. The kinetic projectiles were deflected by gravitational fields that bent space around. The human vessels. "No damage to any human ships," reported Communications Officer Linda Hayes. "Enemy weapons are having no effect." Collins watched the battle display with satisfaction. The Coalition had put everything they had into that first attack. They had expected to see human ships exploding or at least slowing down. Instead, the human fleet continued its advance without even returning fire. "They're starting to panic," observed Tony Martinez. "Several Coalition ships are breaking formation." The human fleet reached optimal firing range and stopped. For a moment, space was quiet except for the desperate communications between Coalition ships. Then the dreadnoughts opened fire. The U.E.S. Devastator's quantum devastation cannon fired first. The beam struck a Coalition command ship and simply erased it from existence. The massive vessel, which had taken decades to build, was gone in an instant. Where it had been, there was only empty space. The other dreadnoughts followed suit. The U.E.S. Retribution's molecular disruption array swept across a formation of 12 Coalition ships, turning them into expanding clouds of superheated plasma. The U.E.S. Annihilator's plasma storm generator struck a Coalition battle station, causing it to explode in a chain reaction that destroyed 6 nearby vessels. "Coalition fleet is in full retreat," reported Sandra Williams. "They're abandoning their defensive positions." But there was nowhere to run. The human support ships had spread out to cut off escape routes. Their weapons were smaller than the dreadnought's main guns, but they were still far beyond anything the Coalition possessed. Captain Doug Miller, commanding one of the support vessels, watched Coalition ships try to flee through his sector. His ship's railguns fired projectiles that moved at 90% the speed of light. When they hit Coalition vessels, the results were devastating. "Direct hit on Coalition cruiser," reported his weapons officer. "Target destroyed." The battle turned into a massacre. Coalition ships that had looked so impressive in formation were torn apart by human weapons. Their shields, which should have protected them, were useless against technology that operated beyond known physics. Group of Coalition ships attempted a desperate suicide run at the human fleet. They planned to ram the human vessels and destroy them through pure impact. The plan failed when the human point defense systems activated. The U.E.S. Terminator's defensive grid consisted of thousands of micro-cannons that could track and destroy incoming objects. As the Coalition ships approached, the point defense weapons opened fire. The suicide ships were torn apart long before they could reach their targets. "Coalition flagship is making a final charge," announced Amy Foster from her sensor station. "It's targeting the Devastator." The Coalition flagship was a massive vessel created by combining technology from 7 different species. It was the size of a small moon and carried the most powerful weapons the galaxy had ever seen. Its approach created gravitational waves that disturbed nearby space. Jake Morrison watched the enormous ship advance toward his position. The Coalition had put everything they had into this final attack. The flagship's weapons were already charging, building up energy for one last desperate strike. "Target the flagship with all available weapons," Jake ordered. And the Devastator's quantum devastation cannon fired at full power. The beam struck the Coalition flagship and began its work of destruction. But the massive vessel was protected by shields from multiple species, and it took several seconds for the weapon to break through. Those seconds were enough for the Coalition flagship to fire its main weapon. The beam that emerged from the alien vessel was unlike anything humanity had seen before. It bent space and time around itself, creating a pocket of altered reality that moved toward the human fleet. The beam struck the Yahide Devastator's shields and created a massive explosion that lit up the entire system. For a moment, it seemed like the Coalition had finally found a weapon that could hurt humanity's warships. Then the explosion faded, and the Devastator was still there. The alien weapon had been powerful enough to destroy a planet, but it hadn't even scratched the human ship's defenses. "Shields holding at 98%, reported Katie Sullivan. "No damage to any systems." The Coalition flagship died. Few seconds later, as the quantum devastation cannon finally broke through its defenses, the massive vessel simply ceased to exist, taking with it the last hope of organized resistance against humanity. The surviving Coalition ships surrendered immediately. Their weapons powered down, and they broadcast surrender signals on all frequencies. The great alliance that was supposed to stop humanity's advance had lasted less than 2 hours. "Battle is over," Collins announced to his fleet. "All Coalition forces have surrendered." The human fleet turned its attention to the planet below. Kepler 452b was home to billions of aliens from dozens of species. They had built their cities to withstand orbital bombardment, thinking their defenses could protect them. They were wrong. The dreadnoughts began their bombardment at sunset, local time. The planet's surface lit up with explosions as human weapons struck the defensive installations. The shields that were supposed to protect the cities failed within minutes. By dawn, nothing moved on the planet's surface. The world that had been chosen as the Coalition's final stronghold was now a smoking wasteland. The cities that had housed refugees from across the galaxy were nothing but craters filled with glass and ash. "Planetary bombardment complete," reported Sandra Williams. "No life signs detected on the surface." Collins stood on the bridge of the Dominion and watched the dead world turn slowly below. The Coalition had represented the galaxy's best hope of stopping humanity's advance. They had combined their knowledge, their weapons, and their courage in one final battle. It hadn't been enough. Nothing would ever be enough. "Send a message to all surviving species," Collins ordered. "Tell them what happened here. Make sure they understand that resistance is futile." The message went out across the galaxy within hours. Video recordings of the battle showed how easily humanity's weapons had destroyed the Coalition fleet. Images of the dead planet proved that even the strongest defenses couldn't prot. 1 year had passed since the last resistance cell was destroyed in the Vega system. The galaxy was completely under human control, and Admiral Peter Collins had been promoted to Supreme Commander of Galactic Operations. His headquarters was located on the former Galactic Council world, in a massive complex built from the ruins of alien civilization. Collins stood in his office, looking out at the city below. The beautiful crystal spires that had once housed diplomatic meetings from across the galaxy now served as monuments to human supremacy. Alien workers moved through the streets under the watchful eyes of human soldiers, rebuilding their world to serve their new masters. "Supreme Commander," said his aide, Captain Doug Miller, "the monthly status reports are ready for your review." Collins took the datapad and read through the reports with satisfaction. Human colonies were being established on the best worlds in the galaxy. The alien populations that survived the war were being relocated to designated planets where they could be easily controlled. "How are the production quotas?" Collins asked. "Exceeding expectations," Doug replied. "The alien workers are very motivated." They understand that failure to meet quotas results in elimination. Collins nodded. The surviving aliens had learned quickly that their continued existence depended on serving humanity's needs. They worked in mines, factories, and farms, producing the resources needed for human expansion across the galaxy. On the other side of the galaxy, Commander Jake Morrison patrolled the Outer Rim territories aboard the UES Judgment. His ship was one of the new generation of human warships, even more powerful than the Devastator. It was designed specifically for policing the conquered galaxy and eliminating any signs of rebellion. "Commander," reported his tactical officer, Lieutenant Sarah Blake, "we're receiving a distress signal from the Arcturus system. The alien workers have stopped reporting to their human supervisors." Jake set course for Arcturus immediately. This kind of behavior couldn't be tolerated. The aliens needed to understand that even the smallest act of defiance would be punished with death. The Arcturus system contained a mining world, where several thousand alien workers extracted rare metals for human use. When the Judgment arrived, Jake found the mining installations abandoned. The aliens had simply stopped working and disappeared into the planet's underground tunnel systems. "It's not exactly a rebellion," observed Intelligence Officer Carol Watson. "They're not fighting back. They just stopped working." Jake studied the sensor readings from the planet's surface. The aliens were hiding deep underground, probably hoping that humanity would just leave them alone. They were wrong. "Deploy the deep penetration charges," Jake ordered. "Seal all the tunnels and bury them alive." The charges were a new addition to humanity's arsenal. They could burrow through kilometers of solid rock and explode deep underground. When they detonated in the tunnel system, the entire network collapsed, trapping the aliens inside. "All tunnels sealed," reported Sarah. "No escape routes detected." Jake watched the mining world from orbit as the aliens died slowly in their underground tomb. They would survive for weeks without food, giving them plenty of time to regret their decision to stop working. The message would spread to other alien populations. Obedience was the only option. Meanwhile, Colonel Ben Harper was overseeing the conversion of former alien worlds to human colonies. His current assignment was New Garden, a world that had once belonged to the extinct Zephyrians. The bioorganic structures that the aliens had grown were being modified to serve human needs. "The biocities are responding well to the conversion process," Harper reported to his superiors. "We should have full human settlements operational within 6 months." The Zephyrian biotechnology was proving useful for human colonization. The living buildings could adapt to human needs, growing larger or smaller as required. They could also process waste and generate food, making them perfect for establishing colonies on distant worlds. Harper walked through one of the converted biocities, watching human families move into their new homes. Children played in gardens that had once sheltered alien families. The transformation was complete. Another beautiful world now belonged to humanity. On Earth, the population celebrated humanity's victory with parades and festivals. The species that had dared to challenge human expansion were extinct, their worlds claimed for human use. The dream of unlimited expansion across the galaxy had become reality. Director Nancy Davis, formerly a communications officer, now managed all alien populations from her office on Earth. Her department kept detailed records of every surviving alien, ensuring that none of them could organize any kind of resistance. Current alien population stands at 47 million. Across 32 worlds, Nancy reported to the Earth Defense Council. All populations are stable and productive. The surviving aliens were useful for manual labor and resource extraction, but they were never allowed to advance beyond their assigned roles. Any alien who showed signs of intelligence or leadership ability was immediately eliminated. Humanity couldn't risk allowing them to develop new technology or organize resistance movements. Captain Lisa Rodriguez, now commanding the U's supremacy, led exploration missions beyond the galaxy's rim. Early reports suggested there were other galaxies with intelligent life forms. New worlds to conquer, new species to subjugate or eliminate. Long-range sensors are detecting artificial structures in the Andromeda Galaxy. Rodriguez reported to Supreme Commander Collins. We may have found new targets for expansion. Collins reviewed the sensor data with interest. Humanity's appetite for conquest was far from satisfied. The Milky Way galaxy was just the beginning. Soon, human fleets would carry Earth's power to distant galaxies, spreading humanity's dominance across the entire universe. The human military-industrial complex had expanded to include dozens of conquered worlds. Each planet contributed resources and labor to humanity's war machine. New dreadnoughts rolled off the production lines every month, armed with weapons that grew more powerful with each design. Captain Sandra Williams commanded the newest and most powerful human warship, the UES Infinity. Her ship was equipped with the quantum reality disruptor, a weapon that could alter the fundamental laws of physics in a localized area. With this technology, humanity could destroy anything that opposed them. The weapon tests were successful. Williams reported, "We can now eliminate entire star systems if necessary." The survivors from extinct alien species huddled together in hidden colonies in the deepest reaches of space. They told stories of the days before humanity's rise, when the galaxy was home to thousands of different civilizations. Now only humanity remained as the dominant force. They came from a small blue world, the survivors whispered to their children. They turned our planets to ash and claimed our homes. Never forget what they did to us. But remembering was all they could do. The surviving aliens lacked the numbers and technology to ever challenge humanity again. They would remain in hiding for the rest of their lives, growing old and dying while humanity expanded across the universe. Supreme Commander Collins stood on the observation deck of his headquarters, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. The galaxy was peaceful now, with no wars or conflicts to disturb the new order. Humanity had achieved perfect dominance over all known space. The age of human rule has begun, Collins said to his staff officers. We control every world worth controlling. Our enemies are extinct, and our servants know their place. The warships that had turned worlds to wastelands now served as guardians of humanity's empire. They patrolled every sector of the galaxy, ensuring that no species could ever again threaten Earth's children. The price of opposing human expansion had been made clear to any species that might consider resistance. New human colonies were being established every month. Earth's population was spreading across the galaxy, claiming the best worlds for themselves. The aliens who survived served as workers and servants, grateful for the privilege of existing under human rule. The quantum weapons that had destroyed entire civilizations were now pointed at distant galaxies. Humanity's expansion would continue beyond the Milky Way, carrying Earth's power to the farthest reaches of the universe. No force in existence could stop the advance of human civilization. Children on Earth learned about the Great War in their history classes. They studied how humanity had defeated the alien alliance and claimed the galaxy for themselves. The extinct species were remembered only as examples of what happened to those who opposed human expansion. The galaxy belonged to humanity now, and it would remain that way forever. The age of alien independence was over, replaced by an era of human supremacy that would last for millions of years. Earth's children had inherited the stars, and they would defend their inheritance with absolute ruthlessness. In the depths of space, automated human probes continued their journey to distant galaxies. They carried messages of humanity's power and weapons capable of destroying entire civilizations. Soon, the inhabitants of those far-off worlds would learn what the Milky Way's aliens had discovered. Resistance to humanity was futile. The new order was complete, and it was eternal. Humanity's warships had turned worlds to wastelands, and from those ashes had risen an empire that would span the universe. The age of human dominance had,